Hi again. Welcome to week 1 of Journalism 170. And we're going to get started by introducing you to your textbooks. Your textbooks, of course, are very important for this course. Probably you hear that for every course, and they probably are, but for this course, extremely important what you're going to get from these textbooks. You're going to interact with these, and actually these textbooks will come in handy throughout your writing career. I still use a variation at least of this first textbook that I'm going to show you. This is the Associated Press style book. It is called the AP book is what we call it, the AP style book. There are about gazillions of different versions of this out there. The one that I ask you to order is the AP Press style book on briefing and media law, 2013. The reason that I ask you to order this particular book is because it has the briefing on media law, and it has a lot of updates on social media and how you are to document sources that you use from social media and how you're to interact with social media. And bottom line here is that social media is not perhaps as much of a reliable source as people might think. It's a good starting place for ideas. It's a good place to link to other resources that you might find for news writing and information. But it is merely an indicator sometimes of where to go for sources. But you shouldn't just say, I saw this on Twitter and so it must be so. You still have to ask yourself a bunch of other questions and maybe ask your sources other questions. Even though you might see it on Twitter or see it on Facebook, that doesn't mean it's necessarily a solid source. So this book will tell you things like that. It will give you heads up. It will give you heads up on how to spell things, how to use certain expressions, how to punctuate certain things. Bet you didn't know that you needed to punctuate or abbreviate certain things differently in news stories than you did for other certain things. Like, for instance, let me give you a for instance. In news stories, we use abbreviations, at least in the date lines now, not necessarily in the stories themselves, but we use abbreviations rather than, we use longer abbreviations rather than postal abbreviations. For example, if we were to abbreviate the state of Arizona, we would say ARIZ, period. Capital A-R-I-Z, period. We would not use an AZ. AZ is a postal abbreviation. Oftentimes people make that mistake in news writing. They will use abbreviations, postal abbreviations, all the way through, and they'll use, for instance, TX for Texas. Well, the only time you use TX for Texas is when you're writing a letter and you're sending something to Texas. That's a postal abbreviation. You don't use a postal abbreviation in papers that you write, and you certainly don't use them in news stories. You do not use a TX postal abbreviation in a news story. You actually spell out Texas. There is no abbreviation for Texas. You spell it out, T-E-X-A-S, every single time you use Texas. Now, the good thing is that most of the cities in Texas, like Houston and Dallas, you actually don't have to use an abbreviation afterwards for the state because you only use the name of the city. Yes, several major cities in this country, you don't have to use the name of the state after them. But you know, your AP Style Guide will tell you all those things. That's why it's so thick and juicy. Actually, only the first part of it is really the book. The last part of it is all those style guides on law, media law. It keeps you straight on what's legal and what's not. But really, there's going to be so many interesting things that you'll learn. The difference between flaunt and flout, domain names, don't ask, don't tell, cookies, what are trade and trademark names, brand names versus something we just take for granted when we say a can of Crisco, for instance. Well, Crisco is a brand name, so you have to capitalize the C. So you don't just say, chemical mace. If you shorten and you say, I'm going to spray somebody with mace, that's an actual capital letter, mace, M. So, all of those things are, most of those things are going to be in this AP style guide. Notice I said guide. Sometimes people get so caught up in how to write AP style and take things from the guide that they forget that there are other ways to do things and other ways to write, and that others of your professors will not agree with your writing AP style for other classes, and perhaps they shouldn't. If you're writing for an English professor, for instance, composition, they may require you to do things slightly differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're writing for an English class, an English professor, you're writing a composition. They may not want you to write in AP style. And they might not want you to write in short paragraphs with single idea sentences. They might want you to write with more complexity and longer paragraphs with more ideas in them. That's perfectly fine. What you're going to learn to write journalistically is slightly different, and that's pretty much okay. There's a lot of fruit out there, and those fruit are different. There are oranges and apples and bananas. Well, learning to write journalistically means that you're learning to write in a different style. Just like there are poems, there are compositions, there are journalistic stories, and even within journalistic stories, there are feature stories, there are sports stories, there are in-depth stories, there are investigative news stories, there are breaking news stories, hard news stories, there are first-person stories. So all of those different things we will talk about in this class, and you will be better for it. I'm looking up in my corner over here. I've got things publishing to YouTube like crazy, so I'm getting all of these alarms. The second book we're going to talk about is the book that is going to major on theory. And I know you're going, oh my gosh. Okay, so when your syllabus says the Kovach book or the Kovach book in Rosenthal, it'll just say Kovach usually, then you know that this is going to be the book that, yes, it's a little bit dry, but you know what? Theory's good. Theory's kind of like that foundation for the house. When the walls go up and the paint goes on and everything starts looking a little bit exciting, we all get excited and it's wonderful and everything. But the foundation that goes beneath, it has to be rock solid before we step out on it. That is this book. This is a rock solid book. No frills, no pictures. Just chapters, plain boring stuff. But this is really good stuff. This is the stuff that makes the difference. Really, this is the heart of your writing. This is the book that will help you understand the ethics behind your writing. What is meant by minimizing harm? What is meant by the real heart of journalism? Why is it that, and who is it that journalists write for and to? Do they write for the money? Not likely. Most journalists don't make a whole lot of money. Do they write for the fame, or do they write for the truth? And many as Christian believers, do they write because they're really, really convicted about getting the truth out all the time, because God convicts us to be able to tell the truth and tell it well and do it with excellence. So this is the book that will help lay a foundation, the elements of journalism, for what it is that will set a foundation for good writing into the future. Okay, now the book that helps you put all of those things together, all those pieces together, it's called Inside Reporting. It is, and look at all these tabs. I have to have all my little marker things. Your Inside Reporting, okay, kind of takes you on a journey here. It is highly decorative, is what I call it, or you can call it graphic, visual interactive. It has boxes everywhere. Look it over carefully. You will miss things in this book if you do not look it over carefully. It for some people, it's a little busy, a little frenetic. I consider it a little frenetic. But you know what? Apparently, for college students today, it's been shown to be very helpful. Um, but I'll say focus. Try to pick a side, usually, left to right, top to bottom, and go through and read carefully what it says about where you're headed. There's a lot of cartoons in here even. They're trying to appeal to the graphic novelist in you. But there are excellent chapters in here that you will be assigned to read. Read them carefully. And that said, let's talk about week 1, because this is where I'm going to tell you how those chapters especially are going to apply. Your week 1 agenda is very typical for the entire rest of the 8-week course. We don't vary much. You're going to think, oh, that's highly boring. No, it's not. It can be highly volatile, and it will change just as much as the news changes. That's what keeps it exciting. You might look at it and you think, oh my gosh, every week we're going to pretty much, read a couple of chapters, do a couple of AP exercises, do a reflection, and do a couple of news reviews. Pretty much every week, that's pretty much it. The interesting part comes in, however, in doing the AP exercises. Number 1, you're going to pick a couple of things from each letter of the AP style guide, and that's your choice. So that can change up every week. And you're going to pick those, choose those, and then say why you chose those specific things, elements from the AP book, and then what those taught you, why you chose those specific things. So that's as interesting as you make it. Then your news reviews. That's highly interesting. You get to look all over the news and look for legitimate news stories. I mean, I'm not talking, don't look in Yahoo necessarily, Yahoo News. I want you to really start digging through and see what you can find from the LA Times. LA Times is a great source. Look in the New York Times. You're going to look for typically one national news story and one local news story. And what I'm saying is when you are looking for a national news story, look for national or international news story. Not that you're just looking for, sometimes people make the mistake of, say they choose the LA Times, well, they still find 2 stories that are focused locally, but truly look for a national or international news story, and then look for a local news story. Now, that doesn't mean those newspapers can't be on the web, and they should be, because you're going to find me a link, and you're going to put the link in that review. So you're looking to review a story. You have specific instructions in your assignment folder for the week, for week 1, and you're going to be looking through. I'm going to actually bring it up and read it to you. You're going to be writing a paragraph summary, no more than a paragraph. Some of you will get a little crazy and you'll want to write a whole 2-page summary. You'll want to write a recap of it. Don't write a recap. Write 1 paragraph summary. I've got the story in front of me. I could read it for myself. But write a summary. And then identify, this is the important part of the assignment. I want you to identify 5 news writing basics from chapter 3. You're going to go to chapter 3 over and over and over again. Identify the basics from chapter 3 of the hero or text from each article. And then, this is really important, why you chose the articles. And then respond to 2 of your classmates in the message thread. And talk about, did you like their story? How well did you think they did? So identify, classify, and do a thorough job on these. And also avoid blogs. I'm reading back at this now. Um, it says, your assignment says here, their journalistic reverence can be questionable. And I'm wondering, I know I didn't come up with that word. Their journalistic reverence can be questionable. Blogs can be absolutely ridiculous because anybody can write a blog. Anybody can write a blog. So avoid blogs at all costs. I mean, I'm absolutely tell you, don't use a blog for this. We're talking about a news writing class, not a blog writing class. Now, sometimes there are blogs in newspapers. Newspaper will create a blog. There's a little bit of a difference in that, but avoid blogs for now. Look up newspapers. There's plenty of newspapers out there that are online. Look up online newspapers. Okay, so you've got plenty of instructions for how to do all of those. This first week, you also have something that you'll have pretty much every week, a reflection, and that's really easy. Every week those are going to change, or every time you have a reflection, it'll change. So just make sure you read it thoroughly. This first week you also have a review of a PowerPoint. Originally that was an exercise, but I decided it was too early in the term for you to do that exercise and start interviewing somebody right away. But I still want you to review it because this will come up quicker than you think, that you'll actually be interviewing somebody at some point to write some of your articles. So I want you to review it, but then we'll actually do an exercise related to it in week 7. But go ahead and review it now so that you're understanding the principles of it, so that as we move forward, you will be understanding that more and more, and you'll go, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense, because I really want you to understand that. Okay, so I think for now, that's probably good enough. I think the next time I talk to you, we will actually discuss a little bit more maybe of what's in, yeah, we're not going to talk about the birth of journalism. You can read all that. And then next time we'll come back and we'll talk about what is in chapter 2 and 3, some more of these chapters, and get going a little bit more. But get your feet wet, look at some of those news articles, give your classmates some feedback on some of those news articles. I want to see a little bit about what you're thinking and what you're writing before I give you a whole lot of feedback at this point. So you've had a little bit of a chance to get to know me. I told you to look up some things about me, Google me, and be prepared to ask some questions so that I have some feedback next time. And I know a little bit more about you and have an opportunity to read your introductions. So I'm looking forward to next week, and have a great and productive weekend. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.